All right. Welcome to the A's Philosophy YouTube channel. I am A. And tonight I was kind of hoping we would be able to get into a discussion if people are present. Tonight I was going to try and focus on Christianity and more of like an internal discussion about what is true Christianity because it's a never ending battle to try to correct the tradition that has been passed down from the early church, which distorted Christianity. And those distortions became fixed within the Catholic Church, the early Catholic Church. And then the Catholic Church split after several centuries, became the Roman Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church. But because the corruptions were from before the schism, they both inherited a number of distortions. And then the Protestants came along and recognized that there was corruption within the Catholic Church, but also they corrected some things, but also inherited a lot of the other problems. So even to this day, we're having a lot of issues sorting it out. Part of me wonders if it can be sorted out. And part of the problem is that the early church did such a good job of exterminating all the original documents that there's almost no way to know with certainty what early Christianity looked like. Because in my opinion, I would say starting in the fourth and fifth centuries, there was a massive erasure campaign by the Catholic Church, especially after Nicaea, to delete Christian history and any documentation of what the early church actually taught. And I think they did an extremely good job. Now, in Nag Hammadi, they uncovered some texts and some manuscripts that had been buried by dissident or heretical monks. Of course, those who had been deemed heretical, they didn't see themselves as heretical. But we see a small glimpse of what early Christians were looking at. And this picture is unsettling for people who look into it because clearly, these people were considered themselves Christians within the mainline apocryphal text. Yes, exactly. There's so much. There's so much. And the point is that they didn't exterminate everything. And when you look at Nag Hammadi, what we see is that absolutely these early Christian groups were looking at these texts, which were if they hadn't been hidden, they would have been destroyed like everything else, but they didn't find them. So now I think it was revealed in that and probably a lot of other cases too, but especially there that there was this purge of so-called heretical material from the early church. And sadly, I don't think we're going to get a lot of it back. We're not, but the good news is I do think enough is there that we can come to a general picture of what early Christianity might have looked like. But it certainly we can say with I personally can say with certainty that the Catholic Church, the Orthodox Church, and Protestantism are all in different ways very different from what early Christianity was. So correcting this is going to be a huge monumental effort, and a lot of people don't want to do that because they are invested in the structure as it is. But for people who are looking for truth, and even if you're not a Christian, I just think it's an interesting question. What is real Christianity? Even if you're an atheist, to me, if I was an atheist, let's say I was an atheist and I was thinking about what if maybe I want to become a Christian. Well, what Christianity are you going to go into? Because if you're looking at these different options and none of them is the real Christianity, then you're not making the best possible choice. So we have to ask the question: what is real Christianity? And in my opinion, it's not biblical Christianity. It just isn't. And when I mean biblical, I mean the Bible as it's currently defined with the current canon. The early Christians didn't have a Bible. They had texts that they read, and some of them were authoritative, but there was no official list of books that were inspired by God. And this is the book, like a document that basically God sent down from heaven that was written up there, sent down through human messengers. Biblical Christianity is an invention of the early church. So that's going to be hard to get people to accept. But the good news is that Christianity it was always, in my opinion, based on the teachings of Christ, which are preserved in the Bible. So you can still see original Christianity. It's just covered with layers and layers of extra material that the church has told us that we need to look at because it's canonical or whatever. But we need to get more people to realize that real Christianity is just looking at the teachings of Christ. It's not looking at the teachings of Paul. I shouldn't say looking at it. It's not seeing the teachings of Paul as authoritative or even any of the apostles. The only reason we're supposed to look at anybody is to the extent that they tell us what Christ taught. And the problem with Paul is that Paul taught a whole bunch of things that cannot in any way, shape, or be connected to anything Jesus taught or anything that was taught by all the other prophets. So many important Christian doctrines come solely from Paul. And I'm thinking about original sin. The only place, if you look at the Bible, original sin is central to all modern variations of Christianity. But the only place you find it in the Bible is in Paul's letter, specifically in Romans chapter 5. That's the only place in the entire Bible that teaches original sin. But modern Christianity is inconceivable without the doctrine of original sin because because of original sin, we can't save ourselves. Paul was exactly what Jesus warned his followers about in Mark 10. Yeah, exactly. He was someone who would come in the name of Jesus, and we've looked at that text before. And let's see here. Right. Let me see if I can find here. It's in there somewhere. Oh yeah, Mark chapter 13, verse 5. And Jesus began to say to them, see to it that no one misleads you, saying that will come in my name, saying, I am he, and will mislead me. When you hear of wars, I think in Matthew it also says something. Yeah, it's in here. If anything says to you, behold, here is the Christ, or behold, here is there, do not believe him. False Christ and false prophets will rise and will show signs and wonders and will lead astray, if possible, even the elect. Things like that. Yeah. But also, I've been looking at some of these criticisms from external to Christianity, not necessarily criticisms, but theories about the origins of Christianity on MythVision and History Valley. Some interesting content. So I've engaged, and when I say engaged, I've looked at some of these videos. So in the last live stream I did, I mentioned a number of videos that I thought would be interesting to watch, and I think we're going to do a little review right now. Now, I'm not going to review these videos point by point, but I do want to discuss them generally. So this video, I know this is hard to read. Let's see if I can zoom in just a little bit. Oops, nope, that was the wrong one. Let's see how this does. I know it's so hard to see. It's not going to work. Anyways, let's give it the best shot. So MythVision has some interesting ideas, but a lot of it is presented as being solid, like scholarly work, when it's really very speculative. So a lot of people watch MythVision, and I think they get the impression that the claims being made are much more based in facts than is actually the case. A lot of it is dubious interpretations. So I saw a video from MythVision called "Someone Rewrote the Enuma Elis and Called It Exodus," and I thought this was very interesting. I was actually really excited for this one because I've heard a lot of claims about Exodus borrowing ideas from other texts and copying from other texts and things like that. So when I saw this, I was, I was curious. What is the actual evidence? So he brings on this guy. This is Myth Vision. I even forgot the guy's name. I'm sorry. And I know other people are going to have a hard time reading this, so I might read it a little bit. But you can see in one column here, you have the Enuma Elis, which is, I can't remember if it's Babylonian or something along those lines. I think it's a Babylonian text, and you have Exodus. And this individual has, I'm not sure if he's a scholar. Jacob, so I'm going to review a History Valley video right now. So Jacob from History Valley has an amazing video laying out the connection between Yahweh and earlier storm gods. You can find it by typing History Valley, Yahweh Ishkor, highly recommend. So I've got to review a video like that. It's not that exact video, but it is a similar type video. But I want to review a couple of them because I think this is just interesting. And I know the people are going to have a hard time reading this, but this is one of these things that it's these claims about mimesis or plagiarism of the Bible from other cultures. And to me, when I look at these actual claims, I find them to be much more speculative and liberal interpretation than they are exact or undeniable relationships. So what do I mean by that? If we go to the Enuma Elis, he has a table where he's compared this, I think it's a Babylonian text, to Exodus. And he says that these are clear cases of Exodus copying or borrowing or mimicking this. Yeah, right. Clearly my real name, right? That's what's on my driver's license, A. So let's just read a couple of these. So here's the Enuma Elis, and then we're going to read Exodus. Apsu and Tiamat, water god and goddess, mingled their waters together. The gods were created within them. Their clamor got loud, throwing Tiamat into a turmoil. They jarred the nerves of Tiamat. Okay, so that's the Enuma Elis. Here's where Exodus is supposed to have copied that, or paralleled it, or mimicked it, or whatever you want to call it. A new king over Egypt said, "Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more mightier than we. When there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land." Now, that is supposed to be a parallel where Exodus copied or mimicked Enuma Elis. And I don't know how anyone could read that and think that this is some sort of parallel in any sense. Let's read it again. Let's read Enuma Elis, and let's read Exodus. Apsu and Tiamat mingled their waters together. Their gods were created within them. Their clamor got loud, throwing Tiamat into a turmoil. They jarred the nerves of Tiamat. Okay, so that's Enuma Elis. And this person is claiming that Exodus copied that. And here's what Exodus says. A new king over Egypt said, "Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more mightier than we. When there falleth out any war, they join also into our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land." Now, to me, this is just me, and I've already said this. I don't understand how any person could make any connection or parallel between those two passages. Now, when you look at the thumbnail of Myth Vision and you read the title of the video, listen to the title of this video. Someone rewrote the Enuma Elis and called it Exodus. Now, think about that. For him to claim something like that, it almost has to be word for word with the names changed, in my opinion, or some like the locations changed. Someone rewrote the Enuma Elis and called it Exodus. When I saw this title, I was extremely interested. I was like, wow, this is a massive. I really want to see this. But then I saw the actual evidence, and I saw the supposed parallels, and I honestly, just going on this first one, like, I cannot see any linguistic or even conceptual connection between these two parallels. It's certainly not a rewrite of the original. All right, let's go to the second one. In heaven, hold on. This is really annoying. In heaven and netherworld, he stations 600 gods. Okay, so that's the Enuma Elis. Let's read it again. In heaven and netherworld, he stations 600 gods. All right, that's the Enuma Elis. Let's read Exodus. And the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 on foot. There were men besides children. All right, so let's think about this. The term 600 gods is highlighted, and that is supposed to correspond to the number 600,000 in Exodus. But notice the conceptual background in context is in no way, shape, or form similar. I have no idea what's going on in the Enuma Elis. I've never read that document, but there is supposed to be some sort of parallel or mimesis going on here. And the only thing that really relates these two supposed parallels is the number 600. And the Enuma Elis is just straight 600. And the Exodus, the number is 600,000. So it's not even really the same number. Now, also, if you've read Exodus and you've read really any of the Tanakh, the Old Testament, you know that lots and lots of numbers are used. There's a lot of numerology going on. So eventually, if you just make connections, like you can, if there's the number 6 or 600, you can imagine in a text as long as Exodus with as many numbers as mentioned, there's going to be some sort of part of it that mentions 600 or 600,000 or something. So there has to be some sort of conceptual or contextual background or storyline connection beyond that would really help you draw a firm parallel. But I'm just not seeing it here. If we move forward a little bit, let's try to get some other ones. All right. Yeah, another one. Tiamat cried, "How can we destroy what we have given birth to?" Okay, that's a Enuma Elis. But the midwives feared God and did not, as the kingdom of Egypt, command them, but saved the men and children alive. I'm serious. I fail to see any. And you know what, Andy? I respect that because I respect you saying that because, yeah, when I look, and we've talked about this before, Andy, and I appreciate your perspective. And I'm going to admit to you, it's not like in some of these cases there's nothing there, because I know for a fact that academics have been drawing connections between Exodus and other kind of Babylonian and Near Eastern mythologies for a long time, and some of them are pretty strong. But I was just looking at these, excuse me, and I'm going to say that based on the evidence that I've seen from this guy who was brought on to Myth Vision to make the case, and remember, this is still the title of the video. Someone rewrote the Enuma Elis and called it Exodus. So that was Derek's decision to do that, to call this video that, not the other guys. And, you know, we can go through the whole list. And I am obviously not convinced that the Enuma Elis or the Exodus is some sort of mimic or copy of the Enuma Elis. But not to say that there aren't stronger cases for other texts, perhaps. But yeah, this one, I was thoroughly disappointed by this one. It just goes to show you that if people strain hard enough, like I'm sure in this guy's mind, he's not being dishonest. He probably read these texts and saw some sort of connection that to me is just not visible or apparent. But it does show you that a lot of what these people are claiming is interpretive. and it's not based in solid facts. So in this case, I'm going to have to say that this is not a very strong argument. Now we do come to this this other one that I saw. This is, I think this is, where is it? This is so. Did John turn Jesus into Dionysus? Now for this one, again, I'm not going to review the entire video. What happened? Why is it not working? But I've always kind of had a problem with the Gospel of John in that, as we all know, the first miracle that Jesus is supposed to have performed comes in the Gospel of John, and he turned water into wine. And I've kind of always had a problem with that. It's like, what is the purpose of wine? It's to get people drunk. And to me, not that there's necessarily a problem with drinking in moderation, but when you're at a wedding, you know, that was basically party Jesus. Like Jesus became a party guy and just like made wine for so everyone could get drunk and have a good time. And I've always thought to myself, why would Jesus do that? And what this guy is claiming, or what in this video, what is being claimed with this scholar, his name is Dennis McDonald. What he's claiming is that this is, you know, the Gospel of John trying to co-opt the Dionysian myths from the Greek poets. And one of the things that Dionysus was known for was being the god of I think, wine and festivals and stuff. So to him, this is clear evidence that John was basically borrowing ideas, and that is the explanation. The reason Jesus turned water into wine isn't because that actually happened. It's because John was trying to portray Jesus as, to a Greek audience, as a, you know, kind of bigger and better Dionysus, somebody who wants you to have fun, somebody who wants you to party and have a good time. But to me, the problem with that is, and I'm not saying it's necessarily true, but what I am saying is, like I've said, I've always questioned the idea of turning water, the miracle of turning water into wine, because that doesn't actually like heal anyone, doesn't actually lead anyone closer to God. It just kind of gives you a more pleasure in this world. And it's like, to me, the purpose of the Messiah isn't to so people could go around partying and have a good time. The purpose of the Messiah is to make sure people understood how to have a correct relationship with God. And if you're drunk, and you know, that's not exactly going to work out as well, in my opinion. So I've always just kind of questioned this. There are obviously a lot of other things that were brought up. I think that was probably the strongest connection. I think it does kind of go downhill from there, but I will say that I'm interested in this. I'm interested, and I find that to be kind of an interesting claim. I didn't watch that entire video, but it's 2 hours long. I think I watched like about 45 minutes of it. It's actually more than that. Dionysus was specifically depicted in multiple pre-biblical mythologies, transforming water and wine via divine. Okay, so these are things that Dionysus actually did. So yeah, I would say that the evidence here is much stronger, much stronger. But again, John never comes right out and says, you know, I'm trying to mimic or parallel the Dionysian cults. If people want to draw those connections, in this case, I'm going to say it's not that there's nothing there, but I will say that it's not something that you can see directly by hard evidence. It's something that you have to discern from interpretation, which is not, it's not 100% clear this is what's taken place. But again, the fact that Dionysius did these things and is known to have done these things to the audience to whom this text was speaking, I find to be more compelling, Now, the last one we're going to look at is the Canaanite origin of Yahweh, from pagan God to the only God, Dr. Nicholas Allen. So this one's History Valley, which is a different channel, but a lot of interesting content in this one as well. What I wanted to see from this one was there like, so the idea is that in the land of Palestine and Canaan, before the Jews actually became a cohesive people, there were all of these. I don't know much about him, but he's very knowledgeable. I will give him that. He's very knowledgeable. In the land of Palestine and Canaan, and whatever you want to call it, the Near East, there are all these gods that existed, these local deities, if you want to call them that. And this is the environment that pre-existed before the people who would become the Judeans or the Israelites even came along at all. So these polytheistic cultures existed long before Abraham and anything that even secular historians would call a Jewish people or a Hebrew people. And they had a number of gods, and the claim is that Yahweh kind of borrowed from any number of them. And Yahweh is a compilation of all of these other deities. And the thing that I had heard, and I wanted to verify, was there a god, a deity from any of these cultures that was called Yahweh, and then the Jews basically took that god and made him the ultimate supreme god? And I'm going to say, after having watched the video, I did not see that. Now, there was a god called Yahoo from one of the cultures. Let me see if I can find it, actually. I'm probably not going to be able to do it in this time frame. Where was it? Where does he go through all the names of the gods that existed? Here it is. I really wish all this other stuff would go away. I don't know how to get rid of that. Maybe if I stop moving my mouse. There it goes. All right, so this is a list of all the deities that existed in the pre-Hebraic, pre-Jewish, pre-Israelite cultures. And if you look on so there are the goddesses on the right. I'm not really worried about them. And you have the gods on the left. You can see there are quite a number of them, a couple dozen perhaps. And in the fourth column, you see down there in the middle, you have Yahoo, and Yahweh. Now, Yahweh is the Jewish God. He's listing the Jewish God as just any of these other deities but that's not what we're trying to get. So I listened to this. Yahweh was not one of the pre-existent local deities, cultural deities. Yahweh, he's listed that there as he's counting it as just like all the other gods. So I don't really accept that. But there were two other gods that had similar names, Yah and Yahoo. Okay, so those gods did exist before the Hebrew people came around. And so that's interesting to me because I can sort of see, I wanted to see more about whether those gods linguistically could be connected to Yahweh, or if they had similar character traits to, what would eventually become Yahweh. And I might have missed it. I did watch the entire video, but I didn't really see where the connection was made that Yahoo became Yahweh. Now that would have been, he could have easily done that, and it might have given possible. I didn't really see him try to make that connection. Now, I'm not saying he doesn't think that's what happened, but what I heard him talking about was how Yahweh was, what the Jews were essentially doing was looking at all these other gods and all the cool stuff they were doing for their local peoples and tribes. And what the Jews did was came along and kind of combine all of them into this one super god called Yahweh. And Yahweh is a compilation of all, the storm god and the desert god and the water god and the animal god and all the other gods that these people worshipped. The Jews just came along and took all those concepts and kind of smashed them all together and put it, and that's how we got Yahweh. So I didn't really see him try to even make the case that Yah and Yahu specifically became Yahweh. But they did exist. I wonder if that's because scholars know that Yahu isn't the God that actually became Yahweh. But I think this video deserves maybe another watch to make sure I didn't miss anything. But I did not see evidence that one of these early gods had a name similar to Yahweh, and that God basically transformed into Yahweh and became the Hebrew God. I did not see that evidence. What I did see was that there were a lot of other gods basically doing a whole bunch of stuff, and that the Hebrew people copied all of them and put them together, and that's the God that became Yahweh. And Yahu and Yah were just two of these other local deities that the Jews kind of looked at. But I personally disagree with Dr. Lon's case here. I think that the Israelites originally worshipped Baal Hadad as their patron deity and later named him Yahweh. That's an interesting. I think he did get a little bit into that. He did talk about Baal as being one of the principal, more powerful local deities, but I didn't see him directly establish any connection between any of the other gods. To me, it's not really fair to say that we know that the Hebrew people copied the other gods because they arose in an environment where these gods already existed. I don't really think we see this linear transformation where the Jews are worshiping these other gods and then they slowly work it all the way over to Yahweh and build up Yahweh. I just didn't see. I see. In fact, he even talked about evidence that the part of the Isaiah, basically the book of Isaiah, scholars date it, part of it, all the way back to the 800s AD, BC. And that in that text, it mentions Yahweh there. And then you have these other scholars claiming that the Jews made up all their stuff in 200 BC in captivity. So they have all these different ideas, and part of me wonders if they're just throwing things out there just to increase skepticism. It's not that Yahu became Yahweh. Yahu is just a 9th century spelling of the Tetragrammaton. We see in early Hebrew as Yahu. Okay. Well, he didn't present that evidence here, so I'm going to have to see that case laid out clearly more. Maybe there's another video where that. I guess what was the other video you talked about? Let me look at it. Maybe I'll look for that other video you mentioned. Jacob from History Valley has an amazing video laying out the connection between Yahweh and earlier storm gods. You can find it by typing History Valley Yahweh Ishkor. Well, that one you have Yahweh coming from Ishkor. So can you really say that it's Ishkor and Yahu? I mean, that becomes the problem. I mean, maybe you can, but I would have to see. I would look at that, see if that. But anyways, those are the things that I looked at, and I will say the evidence for these things is it's not that it's not that it's non-existent. Okay. Well, let me kind of put a wrap on this one. There's a lot of evidence to explore here and ideas, and it's so much that I'm just going to have to say that there's not nothing there, but also I haven't seen anything personally that convinces me that these scholars have a concrete, undeniable case. So I will say I am going to continue to look into this and see what other evidence there is. And I'll probably look up the video that Andy mentioned on History Valley about Ishkor, because that sounds like it might kind of be right up that alley. But anyways, so that was kind of the stuff that I had watched recently and wanted to discuss. But if other people want to talk about Christianity, I'm not sure. The only other Christian I saw out there was Nunya Biz. The 9 plagues were conquered gods, even the lamb, mimic to mock or mimic, I don't know, but please, no out. Right. Yeah, some of the claims are really speculative, very speculative. But again, I have to, there's so many claims being made, it's hard to, are you doing an open panel tonight? I'd love to lightly dive into the early Yahweh conception and potential mimesis if you only destroy what we were short of. Yeah, we can do that. Especially if no Christians want to join and talk about Christianity, then maybe in, if no Christians want to come on and discuss Christianity, maybe in about half an hour, you can come on, Andy, and you can lay out all of your knowledge and why and what you think some of the evidence is for potential mimesis, parallelisms between other religious traditions in in Babylon, Near East, wherever. But I did want to talk to see if there were any Christians who wanted to discuss what is true Christianity. And I know that my kind of presentation absolutely did not have anything to do with that. But I did want to just kind of review what I had looked at, and that's what I looked at this last week and kind of considered. So, but I guess I did see some other Christian content. The problem with Christian content, let me get out of this. Let me go to something that I'm just going to put it on this verse. I think this is probably among the more important verses in what is currently called the New Testament. But as I'm going about my day. Oh yeah, that would be fine, Andy. I'm not a Christian. I also willing to discuss true Christianity, the intended doctrine presented by Jesus. We align fairly closely. You probably know. Yeah, you can do that, but I do actually really want to hear your thoughts on the parallels between Judaism and other religions, other ancient religions. Like, to me, I think that's a really interesting line of thought. I guarantee you know a lot more about it than I do. So I'd just like to hear the kind of the things that you've heard. I can't guarantee that I'll just accept the evidence you present, but I will kind of consider it and look and just kind of basically remember it as I go about my research. So and maybe depending on what actually happens in this stream, we might actually in the next stream just have that as being the discussion topic, the relationship between ancient Judaism and other ancient religions. And then you can, if you're present at that time, then you will obviously be given a great amount of time to make your case, and whoever else wants to make that case as well. But the thing is, I haven't been as active in the Christian community recently online. Part of that is because I've been banned from so many channels that it's hard. They don't let me interact. Now there are some people who do, and right, yes. What I'm starting to learn is there's a massive amount of information, and it's not an area that I've studied very deeply, but I can absolutely see how people who have studied it, it's worth listening to the ideas, because if there's truth to this, then I would like to know that, because I've always had it. My opinion's always been, if someone can convince me, you can never really prove anything from that long ago, but if someone can show me that there's good evidence to believe what it is they're saying, that it's true, then I'm obligated to believe whatever's true. So it's worth listening to all these different ideas, in my opinion. But for now, I'm gonna try to get something going on Christianity, and see if there's anyone who wants to talk about like basically what it is that Christians should believe, and what is the epistemological foundation of Christianity? Is it the Bible or is it something else? Something like that. Or people who are kind of looking into their faith. Maybe they, are, doubting their Christian faith, or they're coming to Christianity, but they're trying to figure out what the right set of beliefs is. And, as I'm going about, my day, as I was about to say, as I go about my day, and I'm constantly listening to, podcasts and Christian podcasts and things like that. And I'm trying to listen if anybody out there is actually teaching what I think true Christianity is. And the sad thing is, I'm really not. I'm really not. And it's not that they aren't teaching. It's not just they're a little bit wrong. It's that when I listen to it, they're teaching something so far different from what I believe true Christianity is. It's almost unbelievable to me. It's almost unbelievable that I sit there and listen to these people, and some of them are extremely popular. They have massive audiences, not just in, some of them are pastors of mega churches. And I'm not just talking about prosperity gospel people. I'm talking about people who do biblical exegesis from the pulpit, teaching other Christians what to believe. They have large live followings, in-person followings, and they have large YouTube followings, or one or the other. And I'm listening to them, and half the time I'm thinking to myself, they are so wrong. And what they're saying is so, I don't even know the word. Let me try to think of the right word. It strikes me as, let me put it this way. Part of me thinks they have to know what they're saying is untrue. They cannot possibly believe that everything they're saying from their mouth is the truth. And yet what they're doing in that case is this. I think a lot of these people actually do believe in God, and they do believe that there will be a fundamental judgment rendered by God. But for them to actually know that they're sitting up there and teaching people lies means that they know that they're going to be judged and condemned to go to hell for being a false teacher. Because if there's one thing the Bible is clear about, is that false teachers are going to receive a serious, negative judgment. But when I listen to them, and when I hear them teach things that clearly contradict, it's not just they're a little bit different, that clearly contradict and refute what Jesus taught about salvation in the Christian life, I have to ask myself, how are these people, how is this even possible? Because something a lot of these people never do. They talk about salvation. They talk about how to get their souls saved. And you know what's interesting about that? They never quote where Jesus actually answered, how do we go to heaven? Because Jesus, in multiple places in the Gospels, is recorded as answering the question, basically, how do we go to heaven? How do we inherit eternal life? What's the standard? And you know what he never says? He never says, all you have to do is believe that I'm the Savior and I paid for your sins. But that's the general message of all these pastors. Right. Exactly. And this is the verse right here. It's only 4 verses. It's so short. If they wanted to quote it, it wouldn't take very long. But Jesus answered this question right here, among other places, in Luke chapter 10. A lawyer stood up and put him to the test, saying, "Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?" So notice what's being asked here. What shall I do to inherit? Now, sometimes that word is translated merit. It's translated as obtain, as we saw with Andy. It's basically, what do I have to do to get into heaven? Eternal life, heaven. all the same thing. Man, here it is. This is what everyone wants to know. Jesus is about to answer and he answers the question. It's not like he hid it. And Jesus said to him, what is written in the law? Okay, so there's the first problem. See, according to Christianity, quote unquote, we are not saved by the law. Want to know why Christian teachers never quote this passage? Because Jesus goes straight to the law. Jesus goes straight to the law. We're saved by the law. What do we do to inherit eternal life? What does Jesus say? What does the law say? Uh-oh. Can't talk about that. Because everything we're teaching is about how you don't have to follow the law anymore. Now we have a problem. Jesus wants us to follow the law for eternal life, but modern Christianity is based on the idea that you don't have to follow the law because Jesus paid for you, because Jesus did it for you. He answers in Mark, though, his answer was to keep the commandments plus give away all your possessions and follow him. And he does say keep the commandments. Let's take a look at that. Now, it's interesting because that was in Matthew 19 as well. That's the story of the rich young ruler. Let's see if we can find it in Mark, though. Let's get the Mark version. Which chapter was that in Mark? Should really know this by now. No, it's not this one. Never gonna find it. Is it Mark 5 or Matthew 5? Mark 5? No, I don't think it's Mark chapter 5. That's a miracle. It's in here, so I'll find it eventually. I'll find it eventually. The thing is, I've read this so many times. How do I not know where it is? Come on. My audience is getting sleepy. They want to sit here and watch me scroll through pages of Mark. Anyways, if it's in chapter 10, I'm gonna be upset. Divorce. Oh my gosh, it is in chapter 10. All right, we got Charles Oliver. Heaven's Windsong. Nancy has graced us with her presence. It is in chapter 10. Well, Charles, what I'm talking about is the rich young ruler. I think what Andy is talking about is the rich young ruler. Well, because here it is in Mark, his answer to keep the commandments and give away all your possessions. So here it is. He was sitting on his journey. A man ran up to him and knelt before him. So in Mark, it's not a rich young ruler. It's just a man. Good teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus said, why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone. That's interesting because that's kind of a problem for the Trinity, in my opinion. But anyways, moving on. You know the commandments. Do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not bear false witness, do not defraud, honor your father and mother. So this guy also asks, how do we merit eternal life? What shall I do? And Jesus doesn't say to him, we can read this. One thing Jesus does not say is, wait, what? You think you have to do something to get into heaven? You should know that getting into heaven has nothing to do with your works or your goodness. It has everything to do with my righteousness and my sacrifice on the cross. I'm going to pay for your sins, so you don't have to do anything, you bozo. See, that's the kind of answer that your pastor is going to give you. If you ask your pastor this question, let's go back to Luke chapter 10. Oh, well, this guy, so let's just finish this off. Looking at him, he said, and a teacher, I have kept all these things up from my youth. Looking at him, Jesus felt love for him and said, one thing you lack, go and sell all you possess and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come follow me. Part of me wonders, is that commandment specific to that individual? Because if this applies to everyone, then Jesus is teaching that we have to sell all our possessions to go to heaven. But part of me wonders is what I'm thinking is this guy's quote unquote idol was his possessions. Okay. And here it is right here. But at these words, he was sad and he went away grieving, for he was one who owned much property. So I think that when Jesus says that, you have to go and sell all your possessions and give to the poor and follow me, I actually think that that is specifically applied to only this individual. Seems like a follower would play it safe and assume it applies to everyone since it doesn't specify. You know what? You're kind of right though. And what I will say is there have been a lot of people in history who did sell all their possessions and followed Christ. Not, when they follow Christ, obviously he's not there to follow us directly, but they committed themselves to living a Christ-like life, which, obviously in their minds involves not owning property or possessions. And, if I find out at judgment that those are the only people who got into heaven, I won't have any way to say that isn't exactly what Jesus taught. So, I think that, some of the early church fathers did say that when commenting on this, and I actually did a video on this, the point is that your possessions shouldn't be what concern you. If you do have possessions, you are to use them for the purposes of God, and not to think of them as like your possessions, but things that you can use to further the work of God in on this earth. So it's a little bit complicated, but it's not, there are many people in history, you can read about them, who did give up all their possessions, just literally sold all their possessions. And I think it's possible that they're the only ones who are actually following what Jesus taught. And maybe it's therefore, they might be the only ones who actually did what was required of them to get into heaven. It's possible. I personally think that statement from Jesus meant that he realized this man had other things that he Yeah, exactly. See, there's a way of looking at this where that particular statement from Jesus was only applying to that particular individual. Possessions were seen as useless to Jesus' cult because they thought Judgment Day was coming in a matter of years. Yeah, that's part of it. Some of them did anyways. I think it's possible that there was a hidden version of Christianity which taught that because we've talked about this on this channel before, where Jesus prophesied that this generation shall not pass away before all these things come to pass. If that's a literal statement, then Jesus is just a false prophet. Okay, because the things did not come to pass. So the only possible way to deal with it is to say that there's a spiritual significance to these things, which the skeptics will say is a cop-out. But Jesus taught in a lot of things that were publicly said in a very literal way, but had a spiritual significance to it, a metaphorical significance. And I think it's possible that the second coming of Christ and all those prophecies, which were supposed to be not very far after the time of Christ, maybe, well, like it says, within one generation. So we're talking maybe within a decade or so, or two. They have to be interpreted symbolically. You cannot say that those are literal prophecies. But the good news about that for Christians and people who want to believe that Christ taught everything that is the truth, the good news is that when we look in the Bible, throughout the Bible, the prophecies are never, well, I should never say literal, never. Many times prophecies are never fulfilled as they are literally given. But nevertheless, they are as stated as having been fulfilled in a a true sense, but a symbolic sense. And that's all throughout the the Hebrew Bible. Some people call it the Old Testament. Some people I call it the original Testament, because it's not like it's old and it's useless anymore. It's just the original Testament. And then Christ gave us the New Testament. And then Paul gave us the newer New Testament, which is not what Jesus taught. I think the term that Jesus used as generation referred to a much longer period of time, possibly the church in its entirety to the end of time. We're really stretching the definition of generation at some point. At some point, we have to because there are other places where it says these things will happen soon. Okay, well, if your time span is eternity, then soon could be 50 bazillion years from now. Because no matter how long you set a definite time period, there's going to be an eternal amount of time after that. So 50 bazillion years is nothing compared to the 50 bazillion years after that. Yeah, and then you do see statements like this. Some of you standing here will not taste death. So it does make you wonder how some of these things can be reconciled. Sell your stuff as you continue to do what you're doing. Be prosperous. Sell all 99 balloons every day of your life. Non-literal fulfillment is not fulfillment. I disagree. As long as it's filled in either the literal sense or the symbolic sense, because as I just said, Charles, and again, I appreciate your interaction, but I'm just throwing this out to you. A number of prophecies in the Bible were not literally fulfilled, but they were explicitly stated as having been fulfilled. So you can't just say that every prophecy has to be literally fulfilled as it's given, because even the Bible itself refutes that notion. Now, again, if you want to say it's a cop-out, I wouldn't blame you, but I am saying that that is a possibility for the believer. So, but that falls in the realm of eschatology. Like what? Well, just off the top of my head, I won't have time to go look at them. But you have the dreams and we're talking about the Hebrew Bible. Okay. So we're looking at things that happened before Christ. You have the dreams of it's in the Tanakh of Joseph, where he interpreted the dreams of the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh was given basically a prophecy in the form of a dream that there would be seven fat cows that would be eaten by 7 skinny cows. Okay, and the Pharaoh woke up and said, "What is it? What does this mean?" And literally, if the prophecy was to be fulfilled literally, skinny cows would have eaten fat cows. But Joseph interpreted the dream and said that the cows represent years of famine, years of feast, and years of famine. So the 7 fat cows were swallowed by the 7 skinny cows. So Joseph interpreted the dream to say the 7 fat cows are years where Egypt is going to have a lot of, rain in the Nile. There's going to be a lot of harvest. There's going to be a lot of food for the people. And the 7 skinny cows are going to be the 7 years of famine that come after that. And so what you need to do, he told this to Pharaoh, what you need to do is you need to, when you have those 7 bountiful years, you need to save up a lot of grain and food to survive the 7 years of famine. Well, I'm just giving it. You said you asked for any example. Okay, so I was giving you an example. But there are other examples that I could have gone to, probably. I mean, there's examples of like I think it's in Daniel where you have this strange, multifaceted figure that's conquering the world, I think he has like a golden head and a silver shoulders or whatever, and clay feet or whatever it is. And that it obviously didn't happen literally, but it represented the different kingdoms that exist. So there's all these different things like that in the Bible. The transfiguration isn't the kingdom of God coming. The kingdom of God comes after Judgment Day. Okay. Right, but the coming of the kingdom of God is frequently used phrase by earlier prophets to refer to the end of the result of the destruction of the wicked. And Jesus says at the end of the speech. I actually don't know who. Is that a reference to something that I said? That's what I'm curious about. Oh, okay. Nanya. All right, got it. Anyways, another thing is, let's go back to Luke chapter 10 so people can read this verse. Let's go back to, so we were deviating a little bit. When the point is, Jesus is asked multiple times, how do I get to heaven? And there's a reason you never hear your pastors talk about these verses. Is because the answer that Jesus gives does not align with the teachings of these various church denominations. Because down to almost the last of them, including I would say even the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church, they have to teach that we're not saved by the law of God, the Old Testament law. But unfortunately for them, Jesus points to the Old Testament law as the path to salvation. And this has caused no short amount of headaches over the last 2,000 years about how do we reconcile the idea that Paul taught that we're not saved by the law, we're not justified by the law. And unfortunately, Jesus is pointing to the Mosaic law as the path to salvation. And different theories have been propped up. Recently, we had a conversation on the last stream with a dispensationalist. That's one methodology. That's one way of going about it that has developed over the last couple centuries. Which is basically to say that there are two gospels. And the one that Jesus taught is not the one we're supposed to follow. Because Jesus' message was not for the Gentiles. Only Paul is for the Gentiles. And it makes me wonder, what if it was flipped? What if Jesus had taught we're saved by faith, and Paul, with his new revelation, came and taught that we're saved by following the law? Would these people still worship Paul like they do? Paul was a liar, Romans 3:7. I don't remember what Romans 3:7 says. But if through my lie, oh, yeah, you're right. But if through my lie the truth of God abounded to his glory, why am I also still being judged as a sinner? That's not the only place Paul says he lies. What is the other one? First Thessalonians. Wait. What does this say? Oh man, no, it's not that one. Why isn't it? Let's see if I can find it. Second Corinthians 11-12. I can't find it, but this is interesting. I just found this. Uh, what does this mean? This is Second Corinthians 7, 2 Corinthians chapter 11. This is Paul supposedly writing. Or did I commit a sin in humbling myself so that you might be exalted, because I preach the gospel of God to you without charge? I robbed other churches by taking wages from them to serve you. And when I was present with you and was in need, I was not a burden to anyone. For when the brethren came from Macedonia, they fully supplied my need, and everything I kept myself from being a burden, and will continue to do so. Let me ask you a question. Did Paul admit he's a thief here? I'm serious. I've actually, like, literally just. I've never seen. I don't remember reading this verse. It sounds to me like Paul is admitting that he stole from other churches. Am I misreading this? 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 7. Or did I commit a sin in humbling myself so that I might be exalted, because I preached the gospel of God to you without charge? I robbed other churches by taking wages from them to serve you. What on earth? Is he just straight up admitting that he robbed other churches? Is there like no context that exonerates him? Let's go back. Let's read this. This is really interesting. Let's read the previous few verses. But even if I am unskilled in speech, yet I am not so in knowledge. In fact, in every way we have made this evident to you in all things. Or did I commit a sin in humbling myself so that you might be exalted, because I preached the gospel of God to you without charge? I robbed other churches by taking wages for them to serve you. And when I was present with you and was in need, I was not a burden to anyone. There is nothing I'm seeing here that suggests that it seems to me like he's actually admitting he robbed other churches. I don't see any other way to read this. And you know what's shocking is I've read all the Pauline epistles like dozens of times, and I never noticed this verse. I have no idea what's going on right here. Is Paul admitting here that he robbed other churches? I don't see any other way. Let's see what other translations have it. I wonder what the King James has it as. The King James translators probably found some way to like paper over it, which is why I never noticed it. Oh no, they translated rob too. Have I committed an offense and abased myself, that ye might be exalted, because I had preached to you the gospel of God freely? I robbed other churches, taking wages of them to do you service. What the heck? I've never noticed this before. Paul is actually admitting that he's robbed other churches. Hold on, let's go to Bible Hub. Let's look at the background. 2 Corinthians, what verse is that? Chapter 11, verse 7. Chapter 7, verse 11. Oh wait, what is it? No, verse 8. Verse 8. Oh wait, what? No, 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 8. I'm so bad at this. New International Version. I robbed other churches by receiving support from them so as to serve you. Look at this, the New Living Translation. I robbed, in quotation marks, other churches. So here they're trying to present the possibility that maybe Paul is being sarcastic, but none of the other translations have that. I wonder what the Greek says. Other churches, alas, ecclesias, esilisa. I robbed. Oh my gosh, he's just admitting he robbed other churches. How have I never seen this before? This Greek word, sulao, means to rob, to despoil or to rob, properly to plunder, exercise right of seizure, to strip and take spoil. To plunder. Wow. I wasn't even looking for that. I found some interesting little nugget that I can use going forward. Yeah, church. Paul was a robber. He even admitted it. Oh yeah. Also in 2 Corinthians chapter 12. 2 Corinthians, we'll be reading the NASB. Verse 16. No. Oh, chapter 12, verse 16. So let's read the other verses for context. I will most gladly spend and be expended for your souls. If I love you more, am I to be loved less? But be that as may, I did not burden you myself. Nevertheless, crafty fellow that I am, I took you in by deceit. So Paul is admitting that he uses deceit to win followers. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, we have this. For though I am free from all men, I have made myself a slave to all, that I may win more. To the Jews I became as a Jew, so that I might win Jews. To those who are under the law, as under the law, though not being myself under the law, so that I might win those who are under the law. To those who are without the law, as without law, though not being without the law of God, but under the law of Christ, so that I might win those who are without law. Notice here that, okay, there's a number of things that stick out to me. Christ is saying there's a difference. Excuse me. Wow. I'm going to have to apologize. Paul is saying that the law of God is different from the law of Christ. So is Paul a Trinitarian? Doesn't seem like it. Because Christ is God. But Paul here is saying that he is without the law of God, but he is under the law of Christ, which I think is very interesting. But what Paul is admitting here is that when he's trying to win the conversion of people who are under the law, he pretends to be under the law, even though he himself doesn't consider himself to be under the law. So he presents himself as under the law, though knowing that he is not, or believing in his own mind that he is not under the law, so that I might win those who are under the law. This is something he's admitting he does. To those who are without law, when there are people who are without law, he himself presents himself as being without law. And then he makes this strange comment, though not being without the law of God, but under the law of Christ. Wait. Though not being without the law of God, but under the law of Christ. What does that even mean? So that might win those. I'd have to look at that. He might be saying he is under the law of God and under the law of Christ. But he does also seem to be making some sort of distinction. Now, let's do comments. I'm not lying. Oh, yeah. Eric Johnson had found that. Greek is usually even more brutal. He was probably referring ideas. No, because the people who supported him from Macedonia gave him that was a separate comment. AI overview. No, 2 Corinthians 11:18 does not prove that Paul was robbing or stealing other churches. In fact, the verses are prime example of Paul using heavy irony and rhetorical exact. See, that's the only way you can get out of it. But my question is, where do you get that from the text? Is that really something that you can draw from the text? Or is that something that apologists have basically utilized to exonerate Paul? I'm honestly asking the question because if Paul is actually admitting to robbing churches, that would be pretty shocking in my opinion. So there might actually be. I even don't put Paul as a robber. I think he makes things up and teaches things that are false, but I don't make him out to be an actual thief. But it sounds to me like he was admitting to being a thief. Robber, liar, phony, persecutor, Roman citizen, Pharisee, all self-admitted by Paul. Yeah, it's pretty wild. Messiah gave sight to the blind, but blinded Paul. He cast out demons, but when Paul asked him 3 times to remove his demon, he said, yeah, right. Exactly. Jesus' true disciples were given ability to cast out demons. Notice that Paul was not. Interesting. Paul's name also derived from the word least, and Jesus says those who lead people astray would be called least in the kingdom. Yeah, I've heard that before. It's really interesting. It makes you wonder. And the people who are least in the kingdom of God are according to Jesus, not people who are liked or not within God's favor. I will be whatever forever to win them over. Isn't that a moral pillar? Don't tell me you're serving pig. Right. The AI overview contains apologetic influences. Yeah, the thing is about AI though, it seems to me that a lot of it is programmed by secularists. So the fact that they would try to defend Christianity, I think that there is something to that. All right, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna post the link. And what we're going to do is this. If someone wants to join, that person may do so. And we'll talk if you want to talk about Christianity, we'll go for about half an hour. And then if Andy wants to join, if he's still around after, I would say half an hour, we can talk a little bit about his ideas. Or he can wait till to the next stream and maybe have more time. Because I think I don't want to make any promises to Andy because I'm not sure how much longer I'm going to be going. But I am going to post the link and see if anyone wants to chat directly about Christian topics. All right. Again, no one has to join. If people want to, yeah, but Nanya, you've been listening to me for years, and for some reason, still you want to defend Paul, even though you're a Hebrew Israelite, and your Hebrew roots. And you know that a lot of people, even within Hebrew roots, don't accept Paul. So I'm not sure I understand. Hold on one second. All right, we got Andy. How you doing, Andy?
What's up?
I'm doing all right. Good to talk to you again. Good to have you on the stream. And I didn't know if there was something about what we've already discussed that you wanted to bring up, or if you wanted to kind of go in a different direction and talk about some of the other stuff we talked about earlier. It's up to you.
Well, I figured I would hang back if anyone else came up and wanted to talk about Christianity. I feel like I've pretty much said most of what I feel about Christianity. I think that you hit the nail right on the head with everything you've said today. I obviously completely disagree with accepting Paul, but I also think that the problems you pointed out with the Gospel of John that Dr. Dennis MacDonald brings up, and also quite a few other scholars have pointed this out as well. I I can't see any good reason to accept the Gospel of John either.
Yeah, it's not just the Dionysian parallels with the Gospel of
Yeah,
John. Even if
but
those weren't the thing that the Gospel of John even creates tension within a strict, even if you ignore the possibility he's paralleling other known works.
mhm.
The Gospel of John has so many issues to it from an
Yeah,
internal standpoint.
he's anti-Jewish for one. He's using like a higher Christology and giving Jesus higher power than everyone else said. He's essentially calling Jesus God. He's writing all of Jesus's quotes in these long, drawn-out narratives that no one else uses. He includes miracles that nobody else mentions.
Yeah, and the thing is, something that was pointed out. I can't remember which scholar it was. It might have been a number of scholars who I was listening to at the time. I had never considered this before, but when you look into it, it's something that kind of I think is a strong possibility. But I'm not saying I believe it. I'm just saying somebody pointed out that it looked like John, the guy, whoever wrote the Gospel of John, um, was familiar with the Synoptic Gospels, but he kind of rewrote them in a way that the theology changed to a more high Christological viewpoint. Um,
Yeah.
and he also changed some other details about the previous narratives that he didn't like, apparently. So I think this is all somewhat fascinating. That it does look like the Gospel of John author wanted to do a little real-time correction of the pre-existing synoptic gospels. But I don't know, what have you ever heard anything about along those lines?
Yeah, those are my exact, I believe exactly what you just said. I think that's exactly what happened. It's a later follower that emerged sometime in the early second century, probably 120s or something maybe. Anywhere from 90 to 130 is the range that I typically hear cited for the dating. But yeah, some person that had emerged much later when the concept of Jesus had grown into something way different than what it started out as. Clearly,
Well, I think that he was probably instrumental in driving that transformation.
yeah,
I'm not sure that the transformation had taken place at that point yet, but something that's very obvious to me is even when you look at the very beginning of the Synoptics, you have Jesus being baptized by John the Baptist.
yep,
And in the Gospel of John, he deletes that scene
yeah,
and makes it very clear that here's the problem. I think John had a problem with the idea that Jesus was being portrayed as inferior to John the Baptist early in his ministry. So
yeah.
what he
Well,
will go ahead.
well, what I personally think it was that it was because Jesus was depicted as being baptized, which is for the remission of sins. You know what I mean? If you're being
Hmm.
baptized, you have sins. John didn't want to depict Jesus as having sins.
I think it goes a little bit. I don't think you're wrong. I think
It might
it
be
might be.
both.
I think what was going on is the early Christians were competing against the because John the Baptist is mentioned in Josephus. He's mentioned in extra biblical sources, a lot of them,
Yep, he had a big
and
cult following.
he had a large following. So I think that the Gospel of John had it in his mind to try to bring some of them into the fold by saying, "Hey, your guy didn't baptize John the Baptist didn't baptize Jesus. What are you talking about? Jesus baptized him or something along those lines, or what was it?
Right.
I'm gonna read it actually. I mean, I don't have this is also interesting right here. Even at the beginning, it kind of takes a little shot at John the Baptist. It says, "There came a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify about that light so that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but he came to testify about the light." So he had to throw in that little bit there about John the Baptist is not the light. Don't be confused. Don't look to him. He's just testifying about the light.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of Dr. James Tabor?
I have, yes, I have.
He's
I'm
one
not a
of my
follower. Go ahead.
he's one of my personal favorite theistic scholars, and he personally holds the belief that James, the brother of Jesus, was the beloved disciple, and that book, even though he considers it pseudepigraphal like I do, he thinks that it was originally attributed to the brother of James and not John.
Oh, that's interesting. He thinks that the Gospel of John was originally attributed to the brother of James.
Like he thinks that an early follower of Christ that was reading that would immediately think that it was talking about James.
Well, the thing is, I've never heard that perspective, so I can't really comment on it. But I will think about it. Again, this is why I like bringing you on because that's just an idea that I've never heard of. And if you don't hear about an idea, you can't consider it and think about whether it's true or not. Um, Recently, I've been hearing about how um, there's been a more of discussion of, and this is again not entirely new, but it's not something that's percolated into the public consciousness. Is the idea that Paul murdered James? Have you ever heard
Yeah,
that?
I don't think that there's a good reason to conclude it, but I wouldn't say believe it, but like if I had to guess, like if I had, if my life depended on it, me answering the question the right way, I would just guess that because it seems like, I mean, we already see how nefarious of a person Paul is, and we already know that he was killing people of the following prior, and we know that he's in it for power. He's clearly power
Mhm.
hungry. Everything seems to line up in that direction, and we know that he had opposition against James. Obviously, him and James
Oh
weren't getting
yes,
along.
and you know what? One of the things about the Book of Acts is that Paul and James interact two times, and in both cases, I think if we could actually go back in time, I think these people were at each other's throat.
Yeah,
But in the Book of Acts, it's just kind of like a little slap on the wrist, like Paul, you're cool. Why don't you just well, let's just get together. I think the Book of Acts tries to cover up the massive feud that was taking place between James, the leader of the Jerusalem sect of Christianity, and Paul and the Pauline sect. And you
I
can see,
completely agree
yeah,
because these were direct followers of Christ, with James being the literal brother of Christ and put in charge of the movement after Jesus died. So it's like you can imagine, and these are like life. Your life depends on these claims. Like they were probably wanting to kill each other over this stuff. So it's completely
yes,
conceivable that Paul did.
right. And
Paul what?
there's
He was already doing that stuff.
exactly. And even in what is the name of that there's an early Christian work that's kind of been suppressed. Man, what is it? The Clementine homilies,
I've never
where
heard of it.
yeah, look into the Clementine homilies and read that. That is a fascinating little study. There's actually two versions of it. It's called the Clementine homilies. Hold on, homilies, and there's another one that's similar to it called the Clementine something or other. It's this kind of the same. The Clementine homilies and the Clementine. Oh shoot, what is the other one? That's basically supposed to have been written by Clement of Rome, but no one actually believes that. Was not claimed to have been written by Clement of Rome, but seems to have been written in the second or third century, early third century. And in that book, it doesn't mention Paul by name, but it clearly describes a figure who is Paul, and it straight up calls him the enemy. But it's written from the perspective of an early Christian, and I think it actually does document the Paul does murder James in that book in that doc in that. So
Wow.
if you have time on your hands, yeah, look into that.
Oh, I'm looking at it. I'm gonna read it tomorrow. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it was they think it was written by an early Ebionite. And again, I've seen scholars. It's clearly a very early document because early fathers are quoting from it. I think as early as the third century. So it's either probably a second or early third century writing, but there's two versions of it, and I can't. The other one actually has a different name, and trying to figure out. And scholars have been trying to figure out what the connection is between the two documents, and why they're different. But if you read them parallel to one another, there's clearly a lot. It's clearly the same story, but some minor things have been changed here and there, and some passages have been removed and replaced and put in. It's something like that. But in both cases, it's written from the perspective of what seems to be an Ebionite Christian. And if you know anything about the Ebionites,
I do.
They did not believe Jesus was God. They did not accept Paul as a true apostle. They only followed the Gospel of Matthew, a Hebrew version of it. And I've seen scholars basically convincingly argue that this document is probably an early Ebionite document, and it clearly portrays Paul, although it doesn't name him, in a very negative light, and calls him the enemy. One of the two versions does.
Well, speaking of the Ebionites, and also speaking again of Dr. James Tabor, Dr. James Tabor also holds the belief that the Ebionites were a fracture of James's cult. He believes that they derived from James's cult specifically. And he thinks that the Ebionites were the earliest actual following of Christ.
I honestly, I haven't, followed or listened to very much James Tabor, but that is a view I also hold. I think the Ebionites are the earliest Christians, believe it or not.
He's been in archaeology on this exact subject about James, not just archaeology. He's an archaeologist by trade, but he's also like a historian and a textual critic as well. And he's been studying this for almost 70 years now. So he's one of the world's leading scholars on the subject. I hold his opinion in really high regard.
Now, here's the thing about James Tabor. I can't remember if it's him or if there's another guy who's, I'm not, I'm going to say this, but he's committed to Judaism. So some of his criticisms do seem to come from disproving Christian theology. So I can't remember if it's him or if it's James Tabor. Oh no, it's Rabbi Tobias.
Tobias Singer.
Singer. I'm thinking about Singer. Sometimes I've listened to him.
Yeah, he's kind of an idiot.
Yeah,
he's just straight up dishonest, intentionally. I think.
I wasn't going to say dishonest, but when I listen to him, I do hear him saying things that I believe are clearly just false.
I just watched a video from him the other day where he talked about biblical slavery, and he tried to pass it off that the only type of slavery was indentured servitude in the Old Testament. I couldn't believe my ears when I was listening to him. How could you just sit here and say this?
Yeah, so he's an apologist for Judaism.
That's crazy.
But so he's trying to make that case, and it's the same thing. Like when I hear him talk about how Jesus didn't fulfill any of the prophecies from the Old Testament. I mean, the skeptics will say that's, but some of them there's some potential there. I do come at it from the perspective that he's someone who doesn't hold to that as a presupposition of his religion. So I just try to listen to him with a little bit. But Tabor, I need to listen to more Tabor apparently because.
Oh, dude. Yeah, I guarantee he's going to end up being one of your favorites. The amount of insight that guy has on such intricate details about things that you would never even think about is just unlimited. Yeah,
I've seen he's been hosted by a lot of YouTube channels that I watch. I guess I just need to sit back and listen to what he's saying. I do remember thinking that he does say some things that I agree with. Not that I only want to listen to that kind of person, but it's maybe he does sound like someone. What I'm trying to say is he sounds like someone that, from my perspective, could learn a lot from. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, definitely. He has a really good understanding of Hellenistic Judaism in general and apocalyptic Judaism. So like he understands the development of, like, because Jesus was kind of like, what Jesus was doing was like a commonly done thing across Jerusalem leading up to the Roman war and through all the revolts. Like there were a bunch of people that emerged claiming to do miracles, claiming to be the Messiah. And they had large followings of thousands of people, and they went to war sometimes. They said they were going to tear the temple down. Josephus mentions them. There are more than a dozen of them.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, so yeah, people who, a lot of people think when it comes to the Paul question, I think this is, personally, I don't think true Christianity can be known until people understand the question of Paul.
I
So
agree.
I'm gonna keep pressing it, regardless of how few people want to hear it, just because, I can sit here and, try to gain followers like some of the other people and try to reconcile everything and say the Bible is just, we just need to interpret the Bible correctly. It's what we need. But, but really, that's not going to get people to the ultimate truth. Because if you try to keep Paul, it all falls apart. But people think I'm making this up. And when I read early church fathers talking about this large sect of Christian believers in Jerusalem in the 1st and 2nd century who rejected Paul, called, you're talking about the Ebionites, obviously.
Yep.
It's like,
and James and Peter as well.
Right. This is clearly something that was there at the beginning. And
also Mark. He kind of had a little dust up with Mark when he was with Barnabas also.
Right. Okay, exactly. He even wrote that. Exactly. So, yeah, that's kind of the thing is. I wish what I was kind of hoping would happen is that a Christian, including one of the Christians, I do interact on a few of the other people's panels and channels, and I always invite them to my channel, and I'm like, you're welcome on my channel. They all obviously disagree with me, but some of them are friendly enough that they don't just boot me, and they're willing to have a conversation. So sometimes what I say when I'm leaving their channels is, you're welcome on my channel. Sub to my channel, and you can come on. That's really what I'm doing when I host these discussions. I'm kind of hoping these people I chat with come on. Not that I don't want the other people to come, but unfortunately, it doesn't really happen that often. But what will happen is other kind of random Christians will join, and I can converse with them. But I would really like to see one of these other. Okay, we have set scales. What I would really like to see is one of these other Christians with whom I've been in talks. Some of them are not going to change their mind, but some of them I wanted them to come on and have this discussion about Paul, about soteriology, about even Christology. I can't say that no one's done it. Mike in the chat, Nunya Biz, has been on the channel a number of times. He's committed to the idea that Paul is an awesome guy. Obviously, I've had Jill on my channel a number of times. He's probably not going to change his mind anytime soon. But I've interacted with so many Christians over the years and invited many of them, and only a small fraction of them have come on. And the only one or two that have is usually to try to combat my ideas instead of try to learn and ask questions. But we'll see. It's, I'm going to keep doing them. And Seth Scales, how you doing, man?
Good. How are you guys?
Good. I didn't know if you had anything that you wanted to make any specific comments, or what were you hoping to say, basically?
Nothing in particular. I've just been wanting to come on your panel again since the last time I came on.
Mm-hmm.
I think I also saw you on Objective Ethics today.
I saw you there in the chat. Yeah, I was there.
I couldn't make it. I went on after you left and talked, but I definitely did not agree with Beyondism. I don't know if you caught what that was.
So what exactly did you not like about Beyond? And I don't agree with Beyondism either for a number of reasons, but I'm just curious, what was wrong with Beyondism from your view?
Well, first of all, the dude Bruno, I can't remember his name, but
Vincent Bruno?
Yeah, he doesn't even represent beyondism. He's over there already trying to reform it into something else, which just shows that it's weak. But from what they were reading about beyondism, it's just based in this idea that uh, technology is going to guide human evolution, and that I think they have this idea that humans are in control of the technology. I don't know, but I don't really think if you're putting all this idea and hope in transhumanism, you're going to lose out on autonomy.
Yeah, the transhumanists, I think, are living in a fantasy world. I don't think we're anywhere close to the point of technology replacing humans or being infused into humans and things like that.
I don't think we're close, but I do think it's completely achievable. And I also do hold the belief that you could transfer your consciousness into a robotic brain.
Well, the problem is, you don't think we can do that now. You probably
No.
This is what I'm talking. I do not think, based on my understanding of like the mind and the soul and the spirit, we will not ever be transferring our souls into a robot or a cyborg type. I just don't think it's possible by the laws of nature as I understand them. Now, I don't have a complete, I'm not saying my knowledge of the laws of nature is infallible, but if it ever does, we are very, very far from being able to do that. Very far.
I know. The human brain, and we barely understand it compared to how complex it actually is.
Right. And I don't think scientists have a good enough understanding of how the brain produces consciousness, if it does produce consciousness. I don't think scientists really I don't even think the brain produces consciousness. I just think it's a medium through which our consciousness acts, if that makes any sense at all. So yeah, I'm just not, if we do get to the point where, what the transhumanists want to say is that humans will at some point in the future achieve immortality by this very strategy of implanting our consciousness in indestructible robot bodies.
Yeah, I agree.
So you think that is something that is a potential reality in the future?
I think it's an inevitable reality if we don't destroy ourselves first.
Wow, that's a bold claim. That is a bold
claim. It is,
claim.
but if you think about it, technology, the technology now increases at a faster rate than it ever has because we're using technology to increase technology. It's doing the legwork now that our brains used to be doing. And so I think that what technology will look like 50 years from now, like if we think from 1950 to the year 2000, how technology changed from then, I think that the changes in technology over the next 50 years are going to be much more drastic than they were in that 50 years. And so I think that what we need to think about technology being in 50 years is probably farther ahead than what we're thinking, because I think we're using artificial intelligence and large language models will be able to clear way bigger hurdles than we would have without it. So I think that robotics are coming along nicely. We have really capable robots. That's not a problem. The problem is understanding the intricate workings of the neural networks in the brain, what every single thing does, because that's what's required if you want to, like we do robotic organs already. We do robotic lungs. We do robotic kidneys, we do artificial skin, everything you can think of. It's all there, robotics, body parts, everything. It's just that the brain is way too complex, and the nervous system in general, for that matter, is just too complex to replicate artificially. But eventually, it'll probably be done with like 3D printers and AI programming and stuff, and it will happen. And when that time comes, I do believe that consciousness does come from the brain, and that your consciousness can be transferred into a robot brain that does a 1-for-1 equivalency to every single function of your brain.
I would say that the next stage in evolution is basically the choice between, are we going to rely on some external medium like technology and be subjected to the whims of it, which is beyond our control, because as you just stated, technology is developing itself? Or are we going to look within and find the internal substance that can evolve the human consciousness to something that was similar to what was lost in previous ages, as described in things like Herodotus's ages of mythology, or I should say that people like Buddha, people like Jesus, people like Lao Tzu are saying that all we need is within us, and all we need to do is recognize that the external world is basically operating exactly as it should be, and we can either choose to go along with it, like, which is the enlightened path, or we can choose to do something else, and basically, like the transhumanists are trying to do, is trying to do something else. They're trying to make their own way in nature. Because if we look at transhumanism, as I was describing on, I think, Objective Ethics today, that this ideology and the implementation of it requires the destruction of life that is not subjected to its inner sphere. So I brought up the example. If you're a fish in a river, and it's been decided by some company that you as a fish can't even comprehend, something like Facebook or Amazon or whatever, has decided that they need to extract the resources from your river to power their LLM. Well, as a fish, you're just screwed. And, as a lower life form, you're just subjected to the will of superiors. No respect for life. This is transhumanism. And what I'm saying, and what those people are saying that I just described, that Jesus is and Lao Tzu's, is expressing a basic self-respect for life, in the sense that we're not going to suck up the entire river to kill all the fish, because they're just a means to an end.
Andy, do you have anything to say to that?
Oh, I don't understand where the disregard for animals comes in, like to transhumanism. Like you could almost make the argument that transhumanism is used as a way to hold life in a higher regard by extending it longer and giving it higher capabilities of, more thinking power, more physical functions than the human body has, the ability to travel outer space, anything, the ability to go underwater, anything.
The thing about transhumanism as it is now is it's based in accelerationism and telos. And the thing is that this telos essentially, I would say, has no real end, but the end would be when machines are reshaping man in their image. When that is done, humanity has been lost, and there's no way to tell if these machines are going to even respect the life around them or the natural habitat that has existed on the earth millions of years before they did. Furthermore,
we don't lose autonomy though. Like we still have our even if we fuse with machinery and give ourselves robot bodies, but maintain like we're still us.
That the point is that this is basically metastasis, which you're describing. You're describing a cancer on the earth which has rejected the natural body that it lives in and is attempting to live at its expense. Because like I said, what is all this water doing for the animals that is taken from them to power these LLMs? Nothing. What's being done with all this land used to sustain all this output and technological growth? nothing that's good for the natural environment. But at the same time, the technological growth relies on the natural environment, but it doesn't actually give anything back. It's a self-defeating system.
Well, I mean, the technological growth can improve the environment. It has improved the environment.
Let me ask, can I ask you a question, Andy? Are you actually supportive of this future vision, or are you just saying you think this is what's going to happen whether you like it or not?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing, and I think that it's going to happen whether we like it or not.
So
Interesting.
how is it a good thing for like the trees and the fish that are just seen as a means to an end and a resource to power?
Well, I don't understand how you're coming to that conclusion.
Because it's a known fact, number one, that LLMs use loads of water to cool themselves. It's also a known fact that they exhibit and produce a large amounts of noise, which disrupts not only the people who live nearby, but certainly the animals as well who live nearby. And furthermore, all this land that is being used to power these things, which are basically in this day and age, the accelerators of transhumanism, these LLM farms, the land that they're built on does nothing to sustain and give back to the natural world.
I mean, hold on really quick. I just wanted to say, like, what I'm talking about has nothing to do with artificial intelligence or large language models. I'm just talking about robotics for your body.
Sure? Because what you just described was machines correcting and reproducing themselves, which is exactly what AI is supposed to do.
Well, no, I'm saying that we use technology to improve technology. Like we've created the technology and programmed it to do what it's doing.
And I'm saying that the teleological end would be technology completely replacing humans, and you're saying this is a good thing, and I'm explaining how this would actually not be a good thing, not just for humans.
I'm not saying it's replacing us. I'm saying that we become technology.
So what's the difference?
Because we're still here. We're just in a different form. We still, like, our consciousness, our thoughts, we still exist as a conscious species. We just don't have human bodies anymore.
So how is that better from what people like Jesus and Lao Tzu and Buddha are saying when they're saying that all we need to do is basically go with the flow and recognize that all the power we need is within us?
Well, because it extends your life and it extends your capability.
But you see, if we're to take Jesus, for example, and if he is really telling the truth that if we live a certain way, we can obtain eternal life, you would basically be restricting that if you were to put yourself into a transhumanist machine designed to make you immortal, because you would be stuck in the physical form, because the eternal life is spiritual, beyond the material. It's in other planes of existence.
Right, but like from my perspective, I don't believe in souls. I don't believe in the afterlife or anything like that. I don't.
So let me ask you this: do you believe that the color spectrum, as we know it, from ultraviolet to infrared, represents degrees of human perception?
I already know where you're going with this. I don't want to cut you off or ignore you, but I realize what you're saying already is that, just because we can't see it doesn't mean it's not there, basically, like another realm or something. But what my case against this is just that I don't have any evidence that there is another realm, though.
But scientifically, it's been demonstrated that human beings can only sense 0.00003% of existence. This means that this color spectrum I described is scientifically proven to represent a minuscule amount of existence, and it's a known fact that there are degrees of consciousness beyond this color spectrum. And if you put yourself into some literal metal box, you're never going to get out of this color spectrum ever.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying about the color spectrum, but what I'm saying is just because, what am I trying to say? Just because we can't see a soul doesn't automatically mean that a soul is there. You know what I mean? Like you're applying this concept of like, well, there's way more here than what we can see, but that doesn't automatically mean that there's a soul or an afterlife just because there's more than what we can see.
I'm saying that there's more to experience beyond what we can see.
I believe it. I'm 100% with you there, but I don't. But that doesn't cause me to believe in a soul or an afterlife. I still do. I still don't believe those things are real.
Well, what is the afterlife? What is dying? All it is
Consciousness,
saying,
consciousness after your body decomposes is what I would call the afterlife.
all it is a change in perception. There is one constant. There's one thing that you have while you are alive that you will have when you are dead, and that is the present moment. It's just a matter of what are you going to be experiencing in that present moment. I imagine it's going to be something vastly, vastly different, but it's still going to be within the degrees of the spectrums that I was describing, but it would be beyond the human's perception in those degrees.
Well, I mean, from my perspective, all consciousness and all thoughts and all memories and all tendencies come from your brain. So when your brain decomposes, there is no more consciousness, there is no perception, there is no thinking. It's just everything stops.
Well, I hate to use this guy as a source because I think he's an actor, but even Neil deGrasse Tyson basically will not deny an afterlife, as he has said that they can use scientific instruments to detect, if you're cremated, for example, they can detect energy leaving your body from where you're being cremated, travel into the air and even into space.
That's what you would expect. There's physical, literal electrical energy inside of your body. It has to go somewhere when you decompose.
So what is that?
Electricity. Same stuff that's in your wall that you plug your phone into. It's inside of your body, running through your entire nervous system, electrical signals. Like about 1 volt of electricity is running through your body.
And you think this is just left over from your brain shutting down?
Yeah, I think that it's produced by your body, and when your body decomposes, the electricity obviously it still exists as energy. Energy can't be destroyed, so it just escapes from your decomposed body after you die.
But here's the thing, it's not just in your body. It's the electromagnetic spectrum is all around us in
Yeah.
conjunction with dielectricity.
Like
So
either way, so like I don't think electricity equals consciousness. You know what I mean? Like it's not consciousness leaving your body. It's just electricity.
it absolutely is consciousness. And it's basically even described right there in the Bible, right there in the first 3 verses of Genesis, when it says, God spoke unto the water, let there be light. That's electricity. That's frequencies or energy gracing a water plane, the waters of the deep, through the air or the spirit. So it's absolutely biblical and it's absolutely scientific.
I mean, when God says let there be light, he was talking about the day and the night.
Yes, and light is electricity. Photons are basically electricity.
No, photons aren't electricity. Electricity is made of protons and electrons. Photons are light particles.
They're part of the electromagnetic spectrum.
I'm not sure what you mean by that, but
So
go
set
ahead.
scales. One thing I would say, I'm going to have to side with the skeptics here. There are a lot of things in our world where the flows of electrons, electromagnetic fields, and things can be detected, but they're not. That doesn't mean there's consciousness there. So just having electromagnetic fields doesn't equate to there being a conscious experience in whatever is demonstrating that. You see what I'm saying?
consciousness is it's more than just electricity. Consciousness is an awareness of patterns within your environment and a recognition of how these patterns relate to the self.
Well, I would
All
just stop.
things
Well,
experience this.
if I could interject, I would say consciousness is awareness.
Yeah.
You know, so the question is, how is this perception of being aware of our environment produced in the biological organism? Okay,
It's
and
inherent.
it's
It's inherent in existence.
So what you're saying, let me ask you this. So what you're saying is if they built a robot that was an exact replica of a human body, including basically they were able to develop a synthetic brain that was basically able to, and this would be obviously is not something we can do now, but just let's just assume it has all the synapses, it has the neural networks. You do not think that consciousness could be transferred to something like that because it's not inherent to that device or basically that robot is called.
I mean, I don't know if the brain was biological like you described, but I know that I've heard of DARPA projects that are described exactly the way you just said it. They try to transfer the consciousness of some person into some surrogate body or robot, and they're like some bunker, and then they have them pilot it miles away. So that's absolutely possible.
Yeah, I think it'll happen no matter what. I think it'll start with like prosthetics. Like it'll start with them using like a computer chip to replace a damaged part of your brain, like a little piece of your brain. They'll replace that with a computer chip, and then as confidence grows and as technology increases in complexity, they'll be able to do more with than just a small computer chip until eventually they can just map out the entire brain and replace all of it. And I think that will be achieved through like a combination of MRI scans of the brain and artificial intelligence assessing those scans. Because I just don't think there's enough time in the human life to even do that. What's up, TBS?
Hey, what's
TBS,
up?
before you go, TBS, I was unfortunately just about to announce that the stream is going to be shutting down pretty soon here. I'm not gonna, but here's the thing: I'm not gonna. I'll give it another 15 minutes because it seemed like you wanted to join in. But I did want to say one thing to Andy, which is that I am fully convinced that the consciousness and the mind are not basically products of brain activity, but rather they exist as independent realities in and of themselves that interact with the brain. So if that were to be true, I think that would kind of throw a wrench in the transhumanist model that you're putting forward. And here's what I'm going to do. Andy can respond to that, and then Toronto Bible Study can introduce himself and say whatever it is he wants to say. So let's do it that way.
Yeah, I would agree that would throw a wrench in that theory, but it's also important to point out that like drugs, for example, can be introduced to the brain to completely alter consciousness. So that kind of seems evidence in the other direction.
Okay. All right. Toronto Bible Study. We've been discussing like a little bit of transhumanism, but I'm not sure if that's why you joined. If you want to make a comment about that, feel free. Or if you want to throw out a different topic for consideration, go ahead and do that as well. Go ahead.
All right. Well, I would just say on what you're talking about here, I agree. It's true. It seems to be true that the mind depends on the brain on some level. Like without a brain, we don't have a mind, right? If we get brain damage or if we take drugs, as he was saying, it affects our mind. But the notion that the mind is just a brain and that we could just like somehow have our mind transferred into a machine or something like that, that's a bit hard to show, right? Because there's all these things that occur in our mind that don't seem to be just from a physical brain. Like if our physical brain is like all these electrochemical impulses in our synapses and stuff. Why would those things lead to like a subjective personal experience? You know, like what they call qualia, like the idea of the color red, the way the color red looks to you, the way you like something and dislike other things, that doesn't seem to proceed just from chemical reactions in your brain. You know, that's why there must be something more to the consciousness than just the physical brain. That's what they call the hard problem of consciousness. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but what do you guys think?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I don't see what you're talking about, Toronto Bible Study, when the hard problem of consciousness is. Let me try and lay it out how the problem as I see it. When you look at the brain and what it's made of, according to modern science, it's a bunch of atoms essentially,
Right.
chemicals, molecules, all combine this very complex structure, right? Well, no, there's no when you look at an atom and you zoom in. Let's say we were able to zoom in to a single atom. There's nothing to suggest that an atom is aware of anything. It doesn't perceive anything. It doesn't perceive the universe around it. And if you continue to accumulate more and more atoms, more and more molecules, none of these molecules is conscious. None of them is perceiving anything. None of them, like when you talk about the color red, an atom can't perceive the color red.
Right.
So the question is, but humans, we know humans because we computed, are perceiving the color red. So how does a conscious experience of reality arise and there's awareness from basic building blocks which don't themselves possess that quality or characteristic?
Exactly.
Well, I think like a kind of analogous example that comes to mind when you talk about that is like ant colonies, for example. Ants are extremely unintelligent. They have a really limited understanding of the world, but yet ants as a large colony can do things that an ant couldn't even understand if they tried, without knowing that they're even doing it. It's like they form a separate consciousness as a group.
Well, that's a stretch. That's a bit of a stretch. Like,
Yeah, I was being hyperbolic. I'm being hyperbolic.
Oh, okay. But the thing is, the reason why the analogy doesn't work is because each individual ant has its own consciousness on some level, right? Or has some kind of instinctual ability to kind of perceive the world, right? And so when they're working as a team, they can do great things. But it's different than like you're just some like synapse in your brain just having some chemical reaction, then that turning into consciousness. It's hard to bridge that gap, you know?
Yeah, I see where you're coming from.
Let me put it this. Let me try another way, Andy. So your brain is firing. The neurons, the synapses are firing, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you get from the electrons passing through the synapses to a visualization and an awareness of the color red? Going back to the example, you know what I'm saying? So the synapses are firing. Mm-hmm. The molecules are going from one place to another, and somehow something is perceiving that in a certain way that is specific to that event.
Yeah. Are you talking about like seeing red and processing it, or just imagining the color red, or does it even matter?
The idea that basically perceiving red in your consciousness, like what is actually go ahead.
Yeah, I think he's asking what happens the moment that it changes from an electrical impulse of molecules to actually seeing red? Like, what makes that happen?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would have to guess that like our consciousness is a collection of like, billions of neurons all firing as a giant network at the same time. So like if you look at something that's red, the certain light hits the certain parts of your eye, depending on the way it's shaped, it sends a signal to your brain, and that fragments off into millions to billions of different, very small, pathways in your brain that we know collectively as the color red, but really it's just a giant network of electrical impulses. I think I don't understand neurology enough to really even have this conversation. But as far as I'm concerned, it seems the most likely to me that consciousness just comes from the brain. Like our consciousness is, in my opinion, just a combination of thoughts, ideas, and real-time perception through our senses. That's all consciousness is. There's nothing more to it. I don't think that there's anything mysterious about it. I really do just think it's all a product of the brain.
All right. Well, how about this? I was going to go for about 2 hours. It's been a little over 2 hours. I know someone just joined and didn't have much to say, but that's an unfortunate aspect. What we'll do is everyone will get a final, thing to say, though. It could be about what we discussed, or it could be about whatever it is. But try to make it about maybe 2-3 minutes at most. See if we can keep it that, and then we're gonna close things down. So we'll go in reverse order of how we joined. We go Toronto Bible Study, then Set Scales, then Andy, and then we'll shut things down. So go ahead, Toronto Bible Study.
Okay, well, I appreciate the chance to participate in this conversation. It's been nice meeting you, gentlemen. I just like to say this, since I only have 2 minutes, I represent a type of Christianity called free grace. It's like a movement. We call it free grace. I don't know if you ever heard of it. But the idea is that salvation is by faith alone, which is something that the Protestant Reformation came up with. But we believe that that idea of faith alone has been kind of changed in most Protestant teachings, where they still add in these works into the solution. Like they'll say you're saved by faith alone, but once you're saved, you will do good works, otherwise you're not really saved, or something like that. They'll say something like that. They'll somehow put works back in. But what we're suggesting as free gracers is that no, salvation is by faith alone, and you can never lose it, no matter what. Once you believe in Jesus, you're born of God, you're born again, and you will never die, no matter what you do, no matter what you believe after that. Sin can lead you to become chastened by God, to lose the rewards in the next life, and it can be very serious to the point of even being killed, or even losing your children, as David did. But you will never lose salvation. You will go to heaven. So that's my good news message I wanted to leave with you gentlemen with, and I hope that helps you, and God bless you. Thanks.
All right, Toronto. Thank you for being here, Toronto Bible Study. Welcome back.
God bless.
All right. All right, Set Scales, go ahead. You're next.
Yeah, I don't really have much to say. I guess good night.
All right, that's something, and I appreciate that. So, you're welcome back, Set Scales. I think you had some interesting lines of thought. So you're definitely good. It'd be good to see you again. Talk to you again.
All right, thanks, Large.
All right, Andy. It was good talking to you. And if you have any closing remarks, feel free to lay them out there.
Okay. We didn't really get to touch on it, but next time maybe we can talk about the origins of the Israelites and the formation of the Yahweh cult, because I think that that's the most fruitful direction that the Bible conversation can go.
Yeah, I admit that I did say we would talk about that, but time unfortunately became an issue, and
Yeah, that's okay.
Maybe next time we'll I'll make the conversation more specifically aligned towards kind of like discussing those kinds of ideas, and hope if you're present, you'll certainly be welcome to come and present those ideas.
I'm looking forward to it. I'll prepare.
I'm interested in hearing what you have to say. So, all right, Andy. I don't know if you had anything else, or if was that it?
Yeah, that's pretty much all. Take care.
All right. Yep. Thanks, Andy. Thanks for joining. All right. I think we had some really interesting discussions there. I'm maybe I'll just let the conversation stand. I was, not that I didn't enjoy the conversations with the panelists, but I was hoping that some Christians who maybe subscribe more to some more mainline ideas would have joined and would have been interested in hearing kind of some different ideas. And in the last stream, which was a while ago now, I think it was a couple weeks ago, there were some who expressed interest in having those conversations, and maybe they'll join in the future. But anyways, the bottom line is this: modern Christianity, for the most part, as it's being taught to people, is literally a satanic deception. Because what did Satan teach? Satan taught that we're not required to obey God. At the end of the day, that was Satan's doctrine. And what did the modern churches teach? That, we're saved by faith alone. And what does that mean? Well, faith alone is distinguished, according to these theologians, from works, and that will include works of the law, which is the works of the law is obeying God's commandments. So I don't know what else to call it except satanic deception. And Christians, there's a lot of people trying to turn to Christ, look for ideas to find out what the truth is, and they're not going to find it in the modern churches, and that bothers me. No modern institution is going to teach them the truth. Some will come a little bit closer than others, but at the end of the day, it's going to be so distorted that the average person is just not going to be able to see the distortion in its sources. So there need to be more people who are aware of this. There need to be more people who are aware that modern Christianity is actually, it's a dangerous idea. It's dangerous for society. Yeah. I visited Jesus and I got with this Paul t-shirt. Right, exactly. That's going to be your modern evangelical Christian experience. And then there's the question of whether Christianity is even true at all. Like we can look at what Jesus taught and see what he said and try to figure out what his actual message was. But then we have to also defend the idea that God exists and that there's actually a spiritual reality that these teachings basically represent and point to. And I think that can be done as well. But we need to get, Christians on the same page. So, all right. I want to thank everyone who joined. I want to thank everyone who participated in the chat, on the panel, certainly, because that was a very interesting conversation. And please like and subscribe. And hopefully we'll, continue to have conversations like this in the future. All right. Thank you all. God bless.